Alright guys, welcome back to Formula 1 news. Has Fernando Alonso uncovered a major cheating scandal currently unfolding in Formula 1? We know all season Ferrari have struggled massively with the ride height of their car and the plank wear that implies, but Alonso believes that some of Aston Martin's direct challengers may be doing a very similar thing and pushing their car too low and effectively breaking the rules, but trying to get away with it in various roundabout ways. Lots to get into today. Very much into your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. Big thank you for 85,000 subscribers as well. We got to that milestone a few days ago. We're growing in followers on Spotify as well. If you guys want to follow over there or listen to these videos, whatever, the link will be in the description as always. Let's get into the first thing to discuss, which is Nico Hülkenberg, Gabriel Bortoleto at the Audi launch event. So they did a launch of this car, as you guys can see in the foreground. This is what it looks like. This is a 2026 mock-up car. It is full size. It won't be the car, of course, that's hitting the track. Doesn't have the internal components, but it looks as a 2026 Formula 1 car will look to some degree. Now, of course, this is effectively a base default FIA style version. What the teams actually deliver next year, I'm sure will look rather radically different. Some of the teams especially will have very different ideas. That is the current theory. I guess the key discussion about this has been the livery, right? What are they going to do next year, Audi? And frankly, is it really going to matter, right? Because this is definitely a striking livery design. All that silver towards the front and then the red and black towards the rear. And this like absolutely dead straight line to separate things. Is that what they're going to do on the real car? Who knows? Is it going to matter? Are we going to see the Audi from P21, P22? I don't know. We'll see how good their car is next year. They know that their engine isn't going to be quite up to speed with the others, but if it's not too far behind, maybe they give themselves a chance. Realistically, they're expecting it to take 4 to 5 years for them to even think about trying to compete for titles. So it's definitely a long road ahead of Audi, but their success in basically every motorsport discipline before definitely would imply they should be competitive at some point. And yeah, just some other pictures of the car. I think you can also kind of tell, even looking at this picture, the car is shorter. I don't know if it just looks that. I mean, it is. We know it's shorter, right? It's, I don't know, 30 or so centimeters shorter than the current ones. So it is noticeable enough, I think, looking at it, that it does feel like it doesn't have quite the same presence that the current cars do, which I think is a good thing. Generally, we do tend to want the cars to get smaller, more nimble, more agile. Actually looks pretty good from this angle, but again, don't trust what it looks like too much, because what they really turn up with these teams next year is probably going to be rather significantly different. We've got some other pictures as well, so I'm going to run through those over the coming seconds with the new livery that Audi are proposing. Do we like it? Is it any good? This is quite a good shot really to show how the intention of the new regulations with these barge boards is to try and keep as much of the airflow internal as possible rather than the outwash that we know the teams love to do, but the cars behind don't like quite so much. So that's your Audi for now, but as I say, it's very much early days. Interesting livery. Whether that will be the true livery, time will only tell on that one. A couple of other pictures if you guys haven't seen these ones already. I think this one we hadn't quite seen before. The other talking point when it comes to liveries today is this. So this is Sergio Perez in a fully blacked out Ferrari. We talked about this the other day, that this was going to be happening because Cadillac, they need to get some sort of track running in. They need to turn up to a track and start up a Formula 1 car, drive it around, test all the communication, make sure they know what they're doing, they can analyze the data and all this stuff in real time. And for that, they need a car, but they don't have a car, right? Because they've not been in Formula 1 before. So what do? You talk to your engine supplier, and you say, okay, can we please borrow a Ferrari? This is an SF23, so it's a Ferrari from a couple of years ago now, but actually, certainly in qualifying trim, as you guys will remember, a pretty damn nice one, right? There was a load of pole positions for Charles Leclerc, especially that season. And this is the livery, right? A fully blacked out Ferrari. You're not seeing this very often. You know, it was, I don't think this side of this millennia, there's actually been a fully blacked out Ferrari on the track. There's a couple, I appreciate there's not many pixels here. There are a couple of videos doing the rounds as well. This is actually probably a better one. And yeah, is Perez massively pushing here into that second chicane? No, but we can still see what is a Ferrari SF23 with hard compound tyres on, fully blacked out, with Perez behind the wheel. So pretty cool timing. The fact that this is happening as it is right about now. There's some other shots of a similar thing as well. Loads of videos of this happening today. Cadillac getting their testing mileage in. I wonder if any team could go for some sort of fully blacked out livery going into next season. Like, I do somewhat doubt it, unless it was all going to be carbon, right? Because as far as we understand, next year the weight limit will be an issue, right? Because the weight of these cars is already a problem. We saw in 2022, it was a massive problem for many of the cars, even Red Bull, towards the start of the season. There's a reason why Alfa Romeo Sauber were so good at the start of 2022, because their car actually was pretty much at the weight limit. There was Perez pushing a little bit more in the SF23, but I don't think they're going to have the room to paint their car fully black. I think that's the key point here, right? Maybe we get a couple of liveries that are more carbon, which I'm sure that we will. Whether it's going to look anything like this. And of course, the teams are going to have their sponsors on it. So just a cool moment, I thought, to see a fully blacked out Ferrari. But they're getting ready for the new season. How competitive are Cadillac going to be with respect to a team like Audi? That is also a very interesting question. Few other things to mention. The big crash from Bortoleto. Of course, he crashed on both days, Saturday, Sunday. But the sprint crash was, well, horrific to watch. Bortoleto stepped out of the car remarkably. But that rebuild apparently cost $2.5 million. So when the cost is $135 million, you can see how big of an impact the World's Destructors Championship on that may have. Luke Browning is going to be in Alex Albon's Williams in FP1 in Abu Dhabi when Sainz was slightly unwell this past weekend. If he wasn't well enough to drive, they would have given the seat to Browning, we believe, rather than Bottas or some of the other options. So he's going to be in FP1 Abu Dhabi. There will be probably other rookies in the cars then as well, including, we think, just to remind you, in Oscar Piastri's McLaren. He's only done one of the mandatory rookie testing sessions this year. Lando has stepped out of his car twice already. Oscar, I think, has only done one of those. It's probably not going to be in Vegas or Qatar, so almost certainly Piastri will be out in FP1 in Abu Dhabi, which is not ideal. It might not be a massive problem, but it's probably not optimal, especially as he may turn up to Abu Dhabi still in the championship. But as it stands, he also may not on recent evidence. There were also a couple of follow-ups to this Toto Wolff situation. So if you guys didn't see the discussion on this, Toto is set to sell a significant portion of his stake. He currently owns 33% of Mercedes. He's set to sell a percentage of the company to take him down to 28% ownership. So he's, I think I kind of said it wrong in the video when I talked about this, he's not selling 5% of his share, he is selling a 5% stake of the company. That is the F1 team, right? Valued apparently at $6 billion, which is pretty aggressive. But they did say, Mercedes, the governance of the team will remain unchanged. All three partners, Mercedes-Benz, Toto Wolff and Ineos, are fully committed to the ongoing success of Mercedes-Benz in Formula 1. So Wolff has hinted at succession plans and shelf life and all this stuff. So yeah, he's selling a stake, we think, probably at a good time to sell it, to be perfectly honest. But equally, he's not going anywhere just yet until he believes his own shelf life is running out, kind of echoing similar comments he talked about Lewis Hamilton not that long ago. But let's talk about this Ferrari drama and what could be going on right now up and down the grid. Ferrari have not been in a good spot lately. Verstappen has scored 154 points since the summer break. Ferrari combined have scored 102. It has been an absolute shambles. They do, however, great news Ferrari fans, have a special outfit, race suit, for the Las Vegas Grand Prix. So you don't just get the red, you also get the stripes of like burgundy. So great, right? Congratulations. I'm sure that's going to convert into a win and pole position. When Pablo Montoya was saying, look, Hamilton's frustration about the team is, well, like justified effectively, and that the team needs to listen more to him if they want to move in the right direction going forwards. But we know that the key issue with that car this season, yeah, the brakes haven't been great. If you push the car too hard, as we saw in Singapore, the brakes just fail on you. And lots of the management for the brakes is coming through lifting and coasting, right? So there's a reason why the SF Lyco or the Lyco 25 or whatever you want to say, lift and coast from lap 2, we've got to manage the temperatures, guys. And there was some talk earlier in the season that Hamilton's driving style was somewhat less vulnerable to this than Charles Leclerc's. But the reality is that both of them have been suffering heavily from lifting and coasting this year, which means the true pace of that Ferrari is better than we have seen. But it's a fundamentally flawed car, although John Elkann may not want to admit that. The other key concern is the right height of the car. We saw right at the start of the season that the Ferraris got disqualified from the Chinese Grand Prix because they had too much plank wear on the floor. This seems to have just been a major miscalculation from Ferrari when they were doing their simulations for the season. They believed they could run the car at a certain ride height and get away with it, but the reality is if they try to run at that ride height, they will damage the floor. Even Hamilton said, I mean, you're going to damage the floor anyway, but Hamilton said, therefore, later in the season, that we are running the car higher than we would like. And this remains true. If Ferrari don't want to get disqualified for plank wear, which, you know, there's some valid debate on whether that should really be a thing anyway, but the FIA have their reasons. Ferrari have to raise their ride heights. They didn't design their car to work at those ride heights, and as a result, other things as well, but they have been struggling. Therefore, they can't push the car lower, because if they did, they'd get DQs. Maybe you can do it in a sprint, as they did in the China sprint, because in the sprint you've got a third of the distance, whatever, so it's less likely you're going to get disqualified for that. But if you try the same thing in the real race, you are going to have a problem. We even saw that plank wear, we think, was such an issue for Charles Leclerc in Hungary that they massively increased the pressure of the tyres in the final stint to literally force the car to be higher than it was before, so they wouldn't get DQ'd, but also accepting the fact that their performance was going to vanish immediately. So it's been a key discussion for Ferrari all year, but understandably, all the other teams are also pushing very hard to see if they can get right down to the limit, because the lower you run the car, you run risk of plank wear. You're going to get some plank wear, but it can't be more than, you know, a millimeter or whatever. If it's 1.01, you get disqualified. If it's 0.99, that's perfectly okay. So the top teams, obviously, they don't want to take that level of risk, but their car's so sound anyway, they can get away with it. Ferrari are in this weird spot where they would love to run lower, but unfortunately, if they ran lower, they'd probably be pretty good, and their car's going to get checked. Now, this is where Fernando Alonso's suggestion comes in, that he believes that there are teams out there that have had illegal cars finish Grand Prix, but they've not been checked. Now, this was actually a big talking point in Austin. You guys probably remember when Charles Leclerc and Lewis Hamilton both got disqualified for plank wear back in 2024. And interestingly enough, I don't believe that the cars of George Russell, Hamilton's teammate at the time, and Carlos Sainz, Leclerc's teammate, were checked because they weren't on the podium. The podium finishes, their cars get looked at. They get scrutinized very heavily, but the FIA don't have the resources to check every single car up and down the grid. They check maybe one or two others, and they call it there, right? But that, of course, doesn't give you the full picture. And as I mentioned at the time, when Hamilton and Leclerc did get disqualified from the US Grand Prix, it was very plausible there were other cars on the grid that finished the race and were classified as legal cars that actually weren't checked for plank wear. If they had have done, there may have been other disqualifications coming. It was a discussion to some degree at the time, and Alonso believes that the conversation is coming back. So this is what Alonso had to say. We wanted to see if we could get to lap 40, but after lap 25, the tyres were worn. We know they tried that one-stop strategy on the hards. That didn't really go to plan. But he said this: I cannot be entirely honest, but everyone has improved a lot. Considering the weekend was a sprint race, the suspicion the Spaniard is referring to is management of the car's ride height. So obviously this aspect changes significantly for sprints, given the ballast and all those other factors. But Alonso likely suspects some of the mid-table teams are playing around with ground clearance at the cost of risking disqualification for excessive pad wear. And this is a very interesting discussion, right? Because let's say you are a team who, if you run your car at the legal ride height, you'll get away with it for plank wear, you're probably going to finish 12th. So, okay, great. How many points do you score for 12th? 0 points. If you lower the car a bit, you might finish 8th, maybe 9th. You might get a couple of points. If you get disqualified, if you get caught out, unlucky, we scored 0. We were going to score 0 anyway. So I think this is where things get very interesting, especially with regard to whether the FIA are actually doing their job properly, because Aston Martin are in an absolute battle in the constructors right now. And as Alonso says, effectively the implication is that they really check the top 5 and 2 randomly selected cars. Yeah, that's right. So as I say, it's the podium sitters, and then it's a couple of others. Depends on, they don't always check every single one anyway. But the point is that not all the cars are checked. And if you're finishing 7th or 8th and you're getting a handful of points, is it worth doing so and taking the risk? Now, the other funny thing about this is that ever since Ferrari got caught with that plank wear problem, I think even before, there were some suspicions that they were running a little bit too close to the ground, so they were starting to get checked a little bit more anyway. And teams that are under suspicion of doing so, the FIA do like to kind of have a look at that just to see and try and put them off doing anything. But the championship is incredibly tight, and we've talked about it a lot for second place because Mercedes are back in second now, Red Bull, Ferrari. Williams are kind of in their own no man's land in fifth. I don't expect anyone's going to score enough points to overtake them. But the point is that the race for 6th is all open. It's super open. Racing Bulls at 82, Aston at 72, Haas at 70, Sauber at 62. So there's a lot of money up for grabs here, right? Every additional point you take is $10 million. Like, it's a big bump in prize money. The teams, especially teams like Haas, really want that. But Alonso seemingly believes that some of the rivals that have done maybe better than he expected lately could be playing around with these games. Of course, he's got no solid proof or anything, but I guess he believes Aston probably should be the best car of those cars. And he said adamantly that we're not doing any of these ride height tricks, but he believes that others maybe are, right? Is it possible that Racing Bulls or Haas or Sauber may be saying, okay, we're probably going to wear the plank too much if we do these ride heights, but it's worth the risk because they're probably not going to check our car. And if we don't score points, they're almost definitely not going to check our car anyway. So that's not going to matter. And if we do get disqualified, well, unlucky, you score 0 points anyway. So do we think that Alonso's got a point here? Definitely intrigued to your thoughts in the comments below. Again, is he seeing ghosts? Or is it plausible the teams could do this? Because, you know, if you do the analysis, you do the pros and cons, you do the risk and rewards, you can understand why there would be a lot of motivation to do so, especially at some Grand Prix where plank wear is maybe more of an issue for certain teams, such as in Brazil, a bit of a bumpy track. It can be a challenge. Some teams, I mean, we saw Red Bull, right, during the qualifying, they raised their ride height substantially and it destroyed their performance. So teams that say, screw that, we're taking the risk, they may have an illegal car at the end of the race, but it might not get checked. So intrigued to your thoughts in the comments. Again, raises questions to me on how fit the FIA really are to do their job properly. Is it plausible to check every 20 cars, like all 20 cars after a race? Probably not, but equally, they could probably be better staffed. So intrigued to your thoughts in the comments. Just the one final thing. I don't know what your thoughts are on this general conversation, but I saw this tweet on the 9th of November after the Grand Prix. Max had that great drive on the Sunday, and it says, yes, this is from a Red Bull fan account, right? So obviously this is going to be some level of bias, but it says a McLaren driver will win the title, but there is only one guy who deserves to be the world champion this year. Now, look, has Max been the driver of the season? I would argue yes. Has he been the best driver on the grid for the last several years? I would also say yes. Is there such a thing as a deserving world champion or a more deserving world champion than somebody else? At the end of the day, this is a team sport, right? As much as the individuals are the ones who we see on the podium, there are 1,000, 1,500 people back at the factories making this happen, and the driver is the tip of the spear of that. So yeah, you might look back at the season and say, well, Max deserved to win, but that's just not how it works. I think you could also argue that Lando or Oscar, if one of the McLaren boys goes on to win, they deserve to win. They chose to go to McLaren. They backed the men and women in the factory working hard on that machine. They put together a machine and they executed and they did the job, right? So, look, it wouldn't be the first time, it wouldn't be the last time that maybe the best driver hasn't won the title. But I think it's an interesting discussion, right? Because it's just, yeah, Max has been great, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the driver who does eventually win is any less deserving. I think like Lando would be, especially if Lando keeps up this current level of performance he's had the recent weekends, Lando would absolutely be a deserving champion, even if he has not been the driver of the season, as it were. So intrigued to your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.